What's up, guys? So today's video, obviously I am outside, it being the holidays and my nephew and whatnot being in the house like all of the time. I just feel a little bit more comfortable out here where there is nobody around, because I've been at this for a couple of years now, but I still feel really weird about vlogging around people. I don't know what it is. But anyway, today's going to sort of be a bit of a dreamcasting. Not so much actors for characters as much as characters for the MCU in regards to the mutants. Trying to remember all of the ones in my head that I had a list of. But yeah, basically it'll just be me picking which characters are most likely to turn up in the MCU, and I will be referring to them for the most part as the mutants, the same way Kevin Feige did at Comic-Con, because a mutant doesn't necessarily have to be an X-Man. They could be part of the Brotherhood, or they could be part of the Avengers, or some other group. So yeah, without any further ado, let's get straight into it. Alright, so I think to start off with, the original comic book version of the First Class, without a doubt, are going to appear. They were Cyclops, Phoenix, Beast, Iceman and Angel, all of who have had minimum 2 films in the Fox franchise. Angel's storyline ties in very closely with Mr. Sinister, with his evolution from being Angel to being Archangel. Not being Apocalypse, despite what the movie did, actually being Mr. Sinister, and considering that he's, in that regard, augmenting mutant abilities, I feel like the MCU could tie him into potentially part of like a darker, more secret part of Weapon X, in that he's been trying to collect powers to augment himself, but I believe Mr. Sinister isn't actually able to use the powers he collects. He's just able to sort of augment them. There is a lizard. Scared the absolute crap out of me. Anyway, yeah, so I definitely think Angel is sort of the weakest link there. Iceman was in pretty much all of the 2000s Bryan Singer storyline ones, having his sort of relationship with Rogue in that one. In the comics, I think he's been revealed to be LGBT, so he has that in his favour. Beast did have sort of a couple of cameos in the earlier films, end up being a core part of the First Class storyline of Fox films, so he's got that going for him. And then the other 3 being Professor X, Cyclops and Phoenix. Obviously the Phoenix saga is one of the most notable comic book storylines that they can pull from. Fox tried to do it twice. Actually have a bad film review about that. Oh, we're coming up to a path again. It's okay. Path diverges again. But yeah, so I definitely think those 6 to start off with are safe bets. Next comes the giant-sized X-Men, which introduced like another 6 different characters. There was Wolverine, obviously is going to be in it. Keanu Reeves only wants to play Wolverine, there's been all these ones where he could be Moon Knight or Silver Surfer, but the only character he wants to play is Wolverine. Swear to God, it sounds like there is something fucking following me in the undergrowth, wigging me out. Sorry about that. I had a spider web on my arm. But yeah, so obviously Wolverine is going to be a part of it, and it'd be really cool to see Keanu Reeves get to play the character he wants to play. Because I think, like, obviously acting ability, and for like super fans, having the right sort of look as far as ethnicity goes. I don't think that he should have to actually be a Canadian to be able to play a Canadian mutant. But as long as he looks like he could potentially be from Canada and it's believable in universe, I think it should be able to be, he should be able to get away with it. Wolverine is a white male. I know the whole big thing with Hugh Jackman was that he was like a full foot and a half taller than Wolverine was supposed to be. But no one really complained because he did a good job. So I think Keanu Reeves is going to be able to pull that off. But not only that, he's got the passion, and it's like the only character he wants to play. Like, he doesn't even want to be like Batman or Superman or anything. He only wants to be Wolverine. So out of all the comic book characters in the entire world, that's the single one he wants to play. And I think having that passion and drive, similar to Channing Tatum wanting to be Gambit, I say just let them be those characters, because they've obviously got the passion. We can see from other films that they've done, because both of those actors are incredibly talented. Just let them be them. Colossus is pretty much guaranteed to be in there. They're bringing Deadpool across, keeping him the way he is. I have a feeling that means that potentially some of his side characters, supporting ensemble, some of his supporting characters, the ensemble. What am I trying to say? Good God. Anyway, Colossus was in the Deadpool movies, so I think it's pretty fair to say that he's almost guaranteed to be in there, because to suddenly have Deadpool 3 tying into Deadpool's storyline continuity, whatever, assuming it does, without having Colossus there, is going to feel very, like it's going to be all of a sudden, well, he was in the first two, where'd he go? They could explain it away as he was, he's off looking for his sister, or he's on a mission with the X-Men, or like they could probably find some way of explaining it away, but they'd have to do that before they make a Deadpool movie, which obviously, if they've already got the actor there, Ryan Reynolds is probably going to want to make a film as soon as possible using that character. So yeah, Colossus is pretty much guaranteed. Storm is incredibly popular. Not only that, but she's got ties in the comics to Black Panther. We could make it that she is a Wakandan in the MCU. She was just sort of like a nobody Wakandan. Discovered her mutant ability, became an X-Man, sort of rose up through the ranks. That's how she got to meet T'Challa, and then that's eventually how they end up getting married in the MCU. Could be. Either that, or she's, in a group of, in a small village or something, that Wakanda has an outreach centre in Central Africa somewhere. He hears about this thing, and it sort of demands his attention, specifically because he's the Black Panther, and then that's how they do it. There's a couple of different ways that they could introduce Storm, specifically for that part of her character. Otherwise, introducing her powers and how she gets her powers, I feel is going to be very similar to how they do it with the rest of the mutants, which is potentially going to involve some sort of eternal experimentation on humans, leaves a dormant X gene in some people, and then the cosmic radiation from the like 4 different snaps of the Infinity Gauntlet that the main timeline has, because obviously there's then the Endgame timeline as well that has all the shows coming off of it, like the Loki series, which is going to take place after he vanishes with the Tesseract and all that other stuff. Ignoring that timeline, in the main timeline, you've got Thanos snaps everyone away, then snaps the stones away, Hulk then snaps everyone back, and Iron Man snaps Thanos and his goons away. So somewhere in those 4 snaps, X genes have been woken up in mutants. I think that's probably how they're gonna address that. So yeah, but as far as Storm actually coming from Africa, also I think it'd be really cool to see her origin story play out, where her village sort of worships her as a god, and then she gets some weird like mind control or whatever it is, tries to put out a fire that she believes is consuming the village, when in reality the village isn't on fire and she's actually flooding it. I think having that be a part of her storyline in the MCU could be really cool. Who else is in that group? Banshee. Banshee was in 1 film, but he could be really cool to introduce, especially if we're going to get Captain Britain, because Banshee is Scottish, I believe. And so as far as Excalibur and having sort of a European group of superheroes, not necessarily just mutants, having Banshee on that team, sort of when we first discover it, could just be like, oh yeah, no, he's only just discovered his powers, and you know, he's here to sort of prove himself, proves himself there while helping Professor X or whatever do a mission, and then that gives him sort of his status as an X-Man. There's also Thunderbird and Warpath, 2 Native American characters. They'd be really cool to see. And then I think the last one in that group was Sunfire, who a lot of people are speculating could be Tadashi Hamada in Big Hero 7. Assuming that film is actually coming, I read a report today that said that it might not be coming because the spin-off TV show that they did for it, for Big Hero 6, is too popular. But if they do it, I want to see the villains. Obviously it'll start off being like, they'll think that Tadashi's the villain. Turns out that it's Tadashi, so they try to save him. How many rows did I go from here? I go back this way, I believe. Yes, obviously they discover it's Tadashi. They try to help him regain his memories, and then they'll still have to take on some bad guy for like the big fight at the end. And I think it'd be really cool to have who was it I was thinking of? Silver Samurai and Lady Deathstrike. Considering that for the most part, the comic book for Big Hero 6 is an Asian team of superheroes, and it's only through Sunfire and the Silver Samurai's involvement in that team in the comics that they're associated with the X-Men. But if Disney now has the rights to the X-Men, they could actually say that Tadashi was a mutant in Big Hero 6, and that the fire and the trauma of the science school exploding or whatever awoke his X gene, which would make him the only mutant that Disney owns that wouldn't have had their X gene activated, I guess, by the Infinity Gauntlet. Other characters that'd be really cool to see. Try to remember some of the higher ones I want. Rogue, obviously, they're going to bring Gambit in. I want to see Rogue. Shadowcat is one of my favourite X-Men, particularly if she's going to get Lockheed. That'd be cool. Forge could be really cool, especially if they're going to start off with having like the school try to play it off like they're just normal kids at a normal boarding school. Forge could be like the shop teacher, and it's only once they've realised that he's making incredibly advanced technologies that no one's actually invented yet that they realise that he has an X-Men power, because obviously that being his power, he's more or less going to be using firearms, like highly advanced firearms, no doubt, but he's going to be using firearms no less as his main offensive in the field. So they could sort of pull him off as sort of being just a regular citizen sort of thing, and it'll only be once the scientists of the Avengers, like Hulk or Hank Pym or whatever, suddenly realise, hang on, that's incredibly advanced tech that hasn't been invented yet. And then they sort of figure it out from there. So he'd be cool to see. Meltdown and Cannonball, I think it'd be really cool to see in X-Force with Deadpool, as well as Pete Wisdom. I mean, having the reveal that the only human member of X-Force, and therefore the only surviving member of X-Force, aside from Deadpool, Cable and Domino from Deadpool 2, being actually an undercover CIA agent who can produce hot plasma knives from his fingertips. I think that'd be quite a revelation. Be really cool to see. There are a couple of others. There's a storyline where they come to Australia. So far the MCU hasn't visited Australia. I think it'd be really cool to see a storyline take place there. The X-Men has one already, and you could quite easily tie that into having a larger group of mutants split into smaller teams of 3 or 4 characters, like they did for Endgame in collecting the stones. Instead of collecting stones, they're trying to take down key members of the Hellfire Club, and have Australia's be Donald Pierce and the Reavers, which would therefore allow us to use Gateway and give us an Aboriginal superhero as well. Because while the MCU is doing really well at bringing in Asians and Muslims and getting the black representation done really well, female representation done really well, still missing a couple of ethnic groups, and Aboriginal Australians are one of those. So having him have access to the dreaming and stuff like Gateway does could be really cool to see. Other than that, villains, obviously the Brotherhood of Mutants would have like Magneto, Mystique, Toad, Blob, Juggernaut, Sabretooth, the usual cast, as well as having characters like Havoc, having Cyclops have to go up against his brother could be really cool to see. Mimic, who has permanently been able to copy the powers of the original 5, hence why I think they should be in the movies to start off with, like from the get-go. They should be the original 5. That way we're not having Wolverine be one of the original 5, and therefore Mimic has Wolverine's healing ability and or bone claws, because we don't really want to have another X-Men series that's pretty much solely focused on Wolverine because he's the most popular X-Man. If they were going to do that, I'd rather they make a Wolverine trilogy separate from an X-Men trilogy, and sort of do what they did with the First Class stuff, have Wolverine sort of appear, so it's like, okay, yeah, cool, he's still part of this overall universe and is still a mutant, but he's not part of the story that we're telling in this film. Because, I think Fox sort of was like, well, we've got this one good character, let's find some some other B-list characters to put around him, and just make a story that sort of focuses on him, which is basically what the original X-Men films were. They were centered around him and his growing relationship with Jean while trying to recover his memories, and then they did his solo trilogy as well, ending with Logan. And I think by the time they were sort of getting to that stage, they're like, yeah, we've overused him a little bit. Let's put him aside. And yeah. So I don't think Wolverine should be the focus. It should definitely be the X-Men are the focus. Other villains, Apocalypse could be really cool to see. I know he was one of the more recent villains, but if they actually had the living monolith and then team him up with some other ancient Egypt inspired villains like the Sphinx, who is a Fantastic Four villain, and sort of have this full on ancient Egypt thing, and the way you could work that into the overall story is that Kang the Conqueror is trying to throw the worst of the worst from all across time at Earth's mightiest heroes, which at this point could include key members of the X-Men like Storm, Rogue, Wolverine, Beast. Yeah, I think that'd be pretty cool to see. Personally, I am near the end of this path. We're going to turn around and go back. But yeah, no. Like I said, it could be Kang's trying to throw history's greatest villains at them, and Earth's mightiest heroes have to sort of gather themselves together to take them down. And so obviously you'd have this group that's based on ancient Egypt with the Sphinx, the living monolith, Apocalypse, the Four Horsemen, and yeah, it could be quite a cool thing, especially if you've had the Phoenix 5 storyline come through, and obviously therefore Dark Phoenix happen as well, and obviously all of these don't have to happen in X-Men titled films. They could just be, like it could literally just be an Avengers versus X-Men film, where you sort of adapt both the Dark Phoenix story and the Phoenix 5 into it, while also having the Avengers trying to stop Jean from destroying the world as well, in sort of a, yeah, I don't know. It'd all really depend on how well they write the script into the story and stuff, because obviously talking about the Dark Phoenix saga, when it's already been done twice by Fox, both times, critically speaking, wasn't done really well. Personally, I actually enjoyed watching Dark Phoenix, like the more recent one. I did actually enjoy that, and I do have my film review for that coming, but yeah, other villains, trying to think off the top of my head, I had a whole list written down, believe it or not. I think it'd be really cool to see Wolverine, if we're going to use Wolverine, have him have his origins with like Alpha Flight and stuff, even if that's just like a flashback, a couple of scenes throughout a film where he's sort of flashing back to his time with Alpha Flight and getting out of the Weapon X program, etc., etc. He could be having to deal with William Stryker and the Weapon X program. Potentially that could also include the Purifiers, which could be his like personal army, because obviously William Stryker is a military man, so having his own sort of private army would make sense for him. You could call them Purifiers. They could be teamed up with Bolivar Trask and the Sentinels, and then all of them could be being controlled by Bastion. That could be really cool. But for Alpha Flight and sort of that flashback, it'd be really cool to see the Wendigo get brought in, as well as obviously Wolverine having to fight the Hulk, because the Hulk is also trying to catch the Wendigo, and that could all take place, as I said, in a flashback during the time when the Ed Norton version of the Hulk was in British Columbia at the end of the 2008 film, when he starts doing like his meditation and stuff and getting control of the Hulk, and sort of starts himself on that journey. So we could get to see Mark Ruffalo in a much more feral version of the Hulk, sort of, I guess, retconning him as always having been the Hulk as well, because he was on the shortlist for the 2008 film, which is why when Ed Norton started having disagreements with them before Avengers was released and began production and stuff, they just switched to their second choice, who was Mark Ruffalo. And now no one can picture him, the Hulk being played by anybody else, sort of thing. So I think that'd be really cool to see. And then like additional characters that could potentially come back or come into it, and will help sort of tie mutants into various corners of the MCU. Obviously, it'd be really cool to see Quicksilver to get to come back, particularly if they're going to bring Magneto in, and have it revealed that he is actually Wanda and Pietro's father in the MCU, having him come back only to find out that his father, who he believed died in a bomb, like a bombing on their village, is actually still alive. It could even be that he's the version of Magneto that we saw in, was it in Apocalypse? Where he was just trying to hide out with his wife, just chilling somewhere, having already discovered his abilities in World War II. So it could literally be a similar version of the character. I just realised that I'm not holding the camera properly. Yeah, it could be the same version of the character as that. Obviously, new actor, different sort of storyline that it's trying to tell. But it could be that he was always the one sort of keeping the bomb from exploding until his children were safe. And then, yeah, he's sort of somehow disappeared or whatever, thought that, you know, like he could maybe think that it was his power that attracted, like his powers of magnetism that attracted, the bomb to his particular house, and therefore decides to leave his children. It would then also explain why Pietro and Wanda survived Baron Strucker's experiments, because they had the X gene, and would therefore be a way of allowing them to retcon them from going from being miracles to actually being proper mutants, because similar to the rest of the mutants then, their powers awoke because of experimentation or exposure to the radiation of an Infinity Stone. I will talk a little bit more about Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver in a later video, because, yeah, there's some things that I've noticed about them in the MCU, as well as how they relate to the characters from the comics, that I don't think have been spoken about. Either they've just kind of been like, oh yeah, cool, we've accepted that, and then no one's talked about them, or no one else has noted them. So I do want to talk about that as well in a future video. But yeah, having Quicksilver come back would be really cool, particularly since he was one of the fan favourite characters from the most recent lot of films, as played by Evan Peters. Obviously, we'd get Aaron Taylor-Johnson back to reprise that role, hopefully. Then we could have Firestar, who traditionally is part of the Avengers. I don't think there's ever been a time where she was an X-Man. She can control microwaves, and as well as having Spider-Man back for at least 2 films, if one of those is going to be a Sinister Six film, as is currently being theorized on the internet, having him team up with Iceman and Firestar in sort of a reference to Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends comic book series, where he teamed up with those exact same characters to take on this larger group of supervillains. I think that could be really cool to see. So having Firestar could be really cool there, as well as then having sort of a resident mutant always on the Avengers team. With her could come the Justice version of Vance Astro, as opposed to the Guardians of the Galaxy, like original Guardians of the Galaxy version. That could be really cool to see as well, because I believe that those two have a relationship in the comics. So he'd be pulled in because of this mutant's involvement. Having Hepzibah could be really cool to tie in. The Starjammers themselves could just be a group of Ravagers on the ship called, the Starjammer. Like Star-Lord's was the Milano, then they had the Benatar. Theirs could just be the Starjammer. You could have Razor, or Raza, however you pronounce his name, from the Ten Rings being there. It'd be really cool to see how well he gets on with Peter Quill, considering that Peter Quill didn't necessarily like Tony Stark, and obviously Razor was the leader of that particular group of the Ten Rings that kidnapped him. So it'd be really cool to see that chemistry played out, with one trying to be more of a heroic figure and one actually just being sort of a reformed villain who could potentially still have villainy pulling at him, and he always wants to go and do the bad thing instead of the heroic thing, sort of thing. Hepzibah is sort of, I believe it's a skunk that she's supposed to be based on, and she's part of that. We'd also then get Ch'od, who's sort of this big sort of amphibian-like creature. He's sort of Hulk-sized, but has very amphibious features, as well as their leader being Corsair, who is Cyclops' father. And if we're going to go to all that trouble of bringing those characters together as the Starjammers, then we could also potentially get to see the Shi'ar and Queen Lilandra, and their side of the war with the Kree. Potentially they would then team up with the Skrulls to try and rid the universe of the Kree. Xandarians might come in as well. We'd get the whole Secret Wars storyline playing out as well, with all of these different alien races potentially trying to influence and like infiltrate Earth in order to sweep out the sleeper cells of the opposing force on Earth, with a whole enemy is my friend tactic. Yeah, could be really cool to see. And then yeah, I think that's it from memory. I think that's it. So if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit the subscription button and the notification bell, so that you are alerted when I upload new videos. As I said earlier, I have seen Dark Phoenix. It is my bad film review for this month. I will be making that video later on today, uploading that today as well. I've also got my intro pack for this month. I don't think I'm going to get time to do a song cover, unfortunately, so that'll probably be one of the first videos I make next month. So I've got that coming as well, and then next month is pretty well organized for videos as well. We got some really cool stuff coming. Then we've got November, which is sort of going to be a bit of a quieter month. I don't have as much planned for November, but then we're finally going to get to move into December and Vlogmas, and then the new year, and that opens up obviously a whole lot more possibilities. I'm going to be making some playlists so that you can watch all of the videos in a particular series over again if you want to. Yeah, I've got a whole heap of really cool stuff coming, so do make sure you hit those buttons. My social media links are in the description down below, as well as information to things that I touched on, like Spider-Man being back in the MCU, Keanu Reeves wanting to play Wolverine, etc, etc. I might also leave a link to the list of when each X-Men appeared for the first time, sort of thing, in the description as well. Feel free to leave me a comment on who you think should be playing particular characters and stuff. Give me your Dreamcasts. Let's get involved in this one. Obviously, I only really brought up storylines and characters that could appear until I know which X-Men and how many X-Men are going to be in the X-Men. I don't really have much more to sort of give as far as which actors I think could play which characters really well, because I think a large part of it as well will be how well they interact with each other, given the different relationships that each character has with each other. Like obviously you want your Magneto and your Charles Xavier to feel like old friends while actually being major rivals as well. So yeah, let me know in the comments who you think should be playing what X-Man, and until next time guys, night to A2, and I'll check you all later.